Now to present the report, we have three individuals who have been critically involved, not just in the report itself, but in this work from the start. Jose Cisneros has been the treasurer of the City and County of San Francisco since the year 2004. He's not running for mayor. Jonathan Mintz has been the commissioner in New York City of the Department of Consumer Affairs since the year 2006. Some of you may know from his bio, and there are more complete bios of all the people who will be presenting today, that he taught the second grade, which I think is a very important credential for work in municipal government, at least in my city. They are the co-chairs and co-founders of the Cities for Financial Empowerment, and they'll be joined here as a part of this panel by Ida Rademacher, who is Vice President for Policy and Research at CFED. Please welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Jose Cisneros, thank you for that lovely introduction. And first and foremost, I want to thank CFED. CFED has done a marvelous effort in terms of pulling all of this information together and putting out this incredible report. For those of us in the CFE Coalition who live this work every day, who are working very hard to find new ways that we can help our constituencies, we don't always have time to do things like document, to do things like, oh, I don't know, evaluate. And we barely find time to do things like fund what we're doing. And so it's really this partnership with CFED that I think really helps us bring a true spotlight, a true critical look at what we're doing. I'm always pleased to be able to go and speak a little bit ahead of New York City because they have a huge volume of things they're going to be able to talk about. We're a scrappy little city over on the West Coast. You don't think about us at all, but we try and do what we can, John.
I can hear you.
And I'm proud of what we've done in San Francisco. You know, I must say, for all the ribbing we get and the criticism, I'm proud that we bring our San Francisco values to this critical need in our community. You know, when we started Bank on San Francisco so many years ago, we were able to leverage, to stand on the shoulders of the real thought leaders in this field. And of course, that included CFED, but many others like the New America Institute, the Brookings Institute, just on and on and on. And it helped us. It helped us know where to go and how to structure these things and how we could work with both their leadership, our resources on the city level, and private industry. And as I think you've already heard today, we really see this as a partnership of all the key players in our cities to make a difference for the folks that need help in our communities. And so I'm excited today to be able to talk to you about and have you look at what we've done in San Francisco. We've worked very hard on getting people connected to bank accounts with our Bank on San Francisco program. We've worked on helping people find ways to borrow money at lower than these incredibly predatory payday lending loan rates. We've followed the models of some of our partner cities in our coalition to reach out and offer education around financial education resources in our city. Our financial education network is really leveraging a lot of the work done in New York and really bringing those resources to everybody in our community. But those things we've done in the past are not just what we're all about. We're not standing still. We're excited to talk today about two new programs that we're launching just right now this year. The first and the one I'm really excited about is our kindergarten to college program. This program will automatically open college savings accounts for every child entering the San Francisco public school system at kindergarten. And let me emphasize, automatically. No signatures required, no parental involvement necessary to get the account open. Obviously, that account is not going to be successful without family involvement. So we're going to really reach out and get families to find a way to, as we talked about all day, save. Find a way to put $10 or $15 or $20 a paycheck or a month into this account and really make a difference for that child. That's what we're excited about doing. And I'm proud to acknowledge that we're working in partnership with our great bank, Citibank. Bob and Ely is here today, and they're really helping us put together a really exciting model of a program for this. It's really going to make a difference. Please stay tuned. We're going to be opening those accounts and seeing those savings come in very soon. The other program we're looking at is a program to really emphasize, and I want to really echo what the mayor of Providence was talking about, Mayor Tavares, this morning, is really getting people to pay attention and sign up for electronic pay, direct deposit. No more paper paychecks. Our goal is to make San Francisco the first paper paycheck-free city in the United States. How great would that be? We're going to work with, on a voluntary basis, all the employers in the city and say, please, work with us, follow our example, hell, follow the federal government's example. Move everybody off of paper paychecks onto electronic pay so everybody's money stays safe. And it's environmental along the way. Those are the kinds of things we're looking forward to doing more work on. Please stay tuned. Thank you again for your time today and your support of the incredible work we're trying to do. Thanks so much.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Mintz. I'm really delighted to be here. I also want to thank CFED from the bottom of my heart and the support from Living Cities. This report is so much more than a cataloging of work that we're excited about, that we've banded together and called a field. It is in many ways, I think, a fulcrum moment for this fledgling actor, this new actor, as Andrea said, in this rich and promising field of asset building. I want to step back for a moment. It's more than just that. It's I believe, the fulcrum moment to bring in scores of other mayors, hundreds of other mayors who can find their own roots into this work. And I think that's part of what this report does so beautifully, is make clear that there are so many different approaches that municipalities can take and so many different entry points that might work for a given mayor for his or her administration's priorities. I want to step back for a moment and talk about, in some ways, where this started. Because where it started was almost an accident, and I think it's a telling accident. So yet another blue ribbon panel, terrific panel, put together yet another blue ribbon report, terrific report, talking about the dire circumstances of poverty in big cities. And there was a line in half a sentence that talked about increasing financial education. If poor people had a dime for every time somebody talked about more financial education, it'd be no problem. But the interesting question then came when people turned around within the city government and said, oh, all right, we need to do more financial education. Where is that? Who's doing that? How do we do more of that? And the light bulb went off, which was, well, actually, city government doesn't usually do financial education. City government doesn't usually play in those waters. And then the question was, well, why not? Well, the answer is the not-for-profit sector is doing it, and they're so good at it. They've been doing it for such a long time, and the cities have been focused on the primary approaches to fighting poverty. The huge streams of public assistance to help people in the direst of circumstances, with staying in their homes, for example. And so then the question came, well, if the city was to start engaging in this work, what approach would it take? And more importantly, certainly for all of us in the Cities for Financial Empowerment Coalition, how could we add unique value as opposed to stepping in and recreating the wheel, muscling our way past those nonprofit organizations and philanthropic organizations that have been doing such a great job for so long? How do we step in and uniquely bring to bear the power and the politics of city halls to really make a difference? It was that basic charge that led us to step back and think about the kinds of tools and opportunities that mayors and their administrations uniquely had. And just a couple of examples, I think, can give you some sense of what we're talking about. There's a big difference between a mayor who shows up at a United Way conference and says, go get your taxes done, and isn't United Way terrific, which is perfectly fine, versus a mayor who is bringing the 311 or the 211 phone number to large-scale public messaging so that people know exactly where to go to get their taxes done. They know which phone number is the one uncorruptible phone number that exists to help people sift through some of the predatory ways that others are trying to get at those streams of federal dollars in the EITC. Some cities are using their connections to the school system to at scale, think about approaches to savings. In New York, one of our access points in my department, the Consumer Affairs Department, is leveraging literal regulatory power. We regulate debt collection and employment agencies, and pawnbrokers, and process servers, and used car dealers, and literally changing and enforcing laws in a way that can have a powerful role in protecting people's assets, in directing them toward protecting their rights, and getting them to the programs that can really make a difference. In Chicago, they've been leveraging public contracts and saying that when we engage with this financial institution and in this particular procurement, we're going to insist that you do X, Y, or Z for our populations. Those are very powerful, literal tools that are uniquely in a city's tool belt. And the idea of using those tools and combining them with, of course, the mandate of helping your population with that part of the anti-poverty war, which is about personal finance, is proving very promising in this report. And it does just a fantastic job. It does such a fantastic job. And it did such a great job. And your whole team, it does such a fantastic job of laying out the ways in which cities can do that and are doing that. And one of the other things I want to talk about in terms of, just real quickly, the city's tool belt, cities are also mandated to think at scale. It is a mayor's job to serve the entire population. And rather than seeing that as making the challenge greater, although it does, it also insists upon a role in the design of programming that automatically thinks at scale. And so many of the programs that are outlined in this report and that our partners are working on all the time take into account this idea of how do you help large numbers. And whether it's large numbers in San Francisco, we've got like 100 people.
Yeah.
Savannah, they have 20 people. Or New York, where we have 1 million EITC eligible. Thinking at scale and insisting that go into the very program design, I think also helps raise the water level in federal and state policymaking as well. Because the question is not just how do you put together a fabulous boutique program that takes a lot of resources, that takes a lot of hand-holding. It's really a question with cities of how do you help as many people as possible. So I'm very excited. I look forward to our conversation to come. I'm very proud of the work that the cities in this coalition have been doing. I have to tell you, we get together every 4 months to share best practices and enjoy each other's fine dining. But we have the first part of our forum is we update each other on the financial empowerment programs that we've done over the preceding 4 months. There are only 11 cities at this point, but that session takes about 4 hours. It's an extraordinary hotbed of innovation and analysis and effort and partnerships that continue to amaze me. The partnerships with the philanthropic organizations, the partnership with the nonprofit providers, the partnership with the financial institutions, the think tanks. It's been very dynamic and exciting. So I look forward to a further discussion, and I'm incredibly grateful for the role that this report, I think, can play in bringing this concept of municipal financial empowerment to the fore.
So I don't really think I have a whole lot to do here. I was going to take you through a tour of the report, but I'll make it brief because I'd love for us to have conversation time and panel time and time for audience Q&A because we've got a magnificent group of people here and in the audience. So thank you all for coming this morning. I want to echo Andrea's earlier thanks, everybody's earlier thanks to all the partners in this work. Jasmine Thomas has been very quiet over there. She's been our program officer at the Surgeon Foundation. And prior to her, Ken Burnett, this is the Strong Local Economies program at Surgeon, who was the very first person to say, yeah, this needs to be documented for for the field in very important ways and really pushed us to find partners. And my sense is that the best way to do research, this is an anthropology background, you spend too much time doing research in bars, talking to people, and it kind of forms you for life, you know? I'd rather sit around a table talking to people to figure out what the real questions and the real issues are and answer them for the people in the field who can do something with the information. And that was the goal of this report. It's been the goal of this whole process. It's been a delight to find such a natural learning group as the Cities for Financial Empowerment Coalition, who does get together to grapple with questions, learn from each other. And we just wanted to help create a platform for that where they could share what that learning was with the rest of the field and hopefully really create that spark that we're talking about so that more and more mayors see this as part of the mandate and part of the toolbox they can work with. Can you flip this? So just really quickly, the set of work we've done over the last 2 years with the cities, actually, this is the culmination of this report. But there were really kind of 4 questions that we were grappling with as we came to the table with the Cities for Financial Empowerment Coalition, with the support from Marianne, Living Cities, and Surgeon. What was the status of household financial security in cities? Most of these cities were just doing it without a whole lot of data. You were kind of flying blind a little bit. You had some great information early on from Q about unbanked status and estimation techniques, but not a whole lot of information at the local level to take a broad view of what does household financial economic security look like. So we wanted to look at that kind of information with the cities. We wanted to look at what are the value-added roles that city leaders can play. So again, not creating the wheel, recreating the wheel, but what is the value that's added? How do you leverage what's already happening by the use of your position in city government? What are the broad categories of strategies that cities were implementing to enhance financial security? That's the bulk of the cataloging piece that we really were talking about. And I think where the conversation today needs to go and where the report leaves off is what's the potential of this work going forward? And what are the policy implications? Where are the barriers and where are the levers at state and federal that can really help to push this innovation at the municipal level forward? So I just mentioned that there are I think there's 11 of you now. It's 12 of you now, right? 11. We've got Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles. Hawaii has just joined. San Antonio, Miami, Savannah, New York City, Providence, and Chicago. It's a great group of cities doing a lot of different work. Jonathan's point that there's no wrong door to enter into based on whatever your mayor's administration is focused on is absolutely right. And of course, there's many other cities, St. Paul being one great example today, doing this work. We don't mean to imply that it's just the 12 cities. We're hoping that more and more growing, but there's something really of value about having a mayoral level designee in charge of looking across city services to say, what can we do? I think I've seen the kind of same type of thing now when you start to see kind of smart growth czars in cities, right? Where kind of smart growth is kind of permeated across, looking across the different silos to see what you do. I would love to see financial empowerment and asset building go the same way for city government. I'm not going to go a lot into the data. Andrea really started the conversation looking at the data today. I would say that some of the investigation we started with the cities was just to see what kind of information we could find to help you get a grasp of what was going on in cities. We ended up, in total, collecting about 67 different individual measures of data points at the city level, the county level, the MSA, the state, and the national, so that these cities could have an internal benchmark and could look across for each other. I'm just going to, the 3 that were highlighted by Andrea, I think are some of the most telling for the work. And the others are all in these municipal profiles we did for the cities earlier this year. Those are all in the back if you want to take a look at the individual cities that are doing work. Suffice to say that even in cities where there's very low income poverty, asset poverty rates are up to 40%. So even if you are making ends meet within the jobs that you're able to find, your ability to fall behind because of that kind of snow emergency towing cost we just talked about is huge. And these rates are not particularly different in cities. They're high in cities. They're high in rural areas. They're high everywhere. We don't need to say that it's just cities, but for the point of this, I wanted to make that comparison. Extreme asset poverty, absolutely no buffer, also in about double the rates of income poverty in some places. We'll talk much more about unbanked and underbanked. We're thrilled that the FDIC data is available now down to the MSA level for cities. One of the exciting things we'll be trying to do as we work with Treasury is figure out if there's an estimation technique we can develop so that all municipal areas can get an unbanked estimation, even if it's not inside the FDIC data. So we're really excited about that work. And finally, this is proprietary data for TransUnion, but this was, I think, really telling for the cities, the level of subprime credit scores in CFED cities. Over 40% of residents in all the cities aren't able to access the most affordable forms of credit because their credit scores are too low. That number jumps to over 60% in 6 of the cities we looked at. And this has a direct impact, as we talked about, on everything from employment and rent applications to affordable mortgage financing. And we'll look at all of these things. So as a tool, and these are still blunt tools, right? They're still at the city level. They're not at the neighborhood level. There's lots of other survey tools to do that. I still feel it's a little bit like working with mittens on versus gloves. You still don't have a real kind of surgical tool to do something in cities in target ways, but it's a starting point and it's a great baseline to work with. And then kind of when you look at the data, similar to how we do the scorecard, when people see data and they want to do something, I just want to reiterate that there are, in fact, many, many different ways that local government can do something. And one of the things that we kind of pushed back and forth with the cities on was to try to identify these kind of discrete roles that cities can play. And depending on who your mayor is, where this work is housed, it really helps to influence what roles you might play. Certainly the bully pulpit, the championing efforts that we saw here today and every place else is a giant role that cities can play. The convening power of diverse local stakeholders and private institutions is huge. And the ability to influence and persuade other actors to engage in these issues. These are all incredibly important tools in a city leadership tool belt. The ability to communicate with residents through public awareness and social marketing campaigns, to connect residents to resources, and give them a stamp of approval that kind of legitimates products. Huge, huge. I visited in New York when I was there, one of the financial empowerment centers. The ability for somebody to go into a place that is kind of labeled City of New York and get financial assistance and financial help was a huge legitimating factor that made them trust that. That was a person who wasn't sure where to turn, right, for the kind of services, because there's so many different ways that you can get information that can steer you on. Embedding this work, integrating this work into existing programs and services, tapping the existing resources at the federal, state, and local funding levels, and then really serving as testing grounds for pilots and for evaluation is just another wonderful set of roles that cities can play. So the 5 main, kind of 12 main roles, 5 main goals, and this was really where we, after kind of months of really working with the cities to catalog everything they were doing, went back and forth a lot to try to figure out what were the specific buckets, right? If you're going to start categorizing these strategies, what are they? The bulk of the paper really kind of looks at these areas, and I'm just going to go through them briefly, so I'm going to go ahead and switch that. So the first one really is improving access to high-quality financial information, education, and counseling. We've talked a lot about that already. To help improve both the quality and the quantity of financial education and counseling services that are already available in cities is a huge ability of cities to pull this together. There's kind of 3 main activities we've seen cities doing in this area. One, they're taking some time to really increase their own understanding of the landscape of current providers of financial education and counseling and rolling a lot of that into some kind of directory or availability and one-stop shopping for kind of where are all the places you can go to get this information. Creating referral networks, connecting education and counseling to existing programs, and also, once they have a handle on it, really working to improve the quality of these programs and improve the quality of training. An example is Seattle's Financial Education Providers Network. It includes a searchable financial education locator that's online. They created a Your Money helpline and used the 211 line, the community information line, to provide referrals. So the second kind of bucket of strategies is increasing access to income-boosting supports and tax credits. This is this whole idea of stabilizing and maximizing income, current income, that kind of sets you on a more stable footing to be able to take a step onto the on-ramp of saving and borrowing. Cities have traditionally provided a whole range of services and benefits to help people in times of need. But this new add-on, right, it's not just the workforce development, and it's not just some of the benefits, it's the coordination of those benefits, both using technology to do that, using actual physical places to go. There's a whole level of innovation here, and lots of different ways that cities are finding ways to do this work. Also, Los Angeles, Miami, Newark, New York, Savannah, San Francisco, all of them are running public education and outreach campaigns to encourage the use of tax preparation assistance and increase the uptake of tax credits. And then there's a couple of cities we're excited that are actually building onto the federal EITC and sometimes the state EITC with the creation of a local EITC. San Francisco, New York, Washington, D.C. even have this. Usually ranges from 1% to 5% of the federal credit, but it's a hugely important way to identify who it is in your city who's eligible for this work, and you can spin out other kinds of services and outreach within that, which is great. Connecting residents to safe, affordable financial products. This is the sweet spot for the CFED Coalition, I have to say. This is the area where a lot of the innovation, a lot of the excitement is really happening. This is where the public-private partnerships and the partnerships for financial institutions are still really at formative stages, and we're so excited about watching where they go. There's increasing awareness about the gravity of the problems of being unbanked, the cascading effects that that can create inside of a household. And almost every single city has really kind of taken on the whole financial access issue, either by creating a bank on, in the case of New York, by actually creating a standard branded New York City product that different banks and others offer as part of that. And I love that this work is being spreading like wildfire, and I love that we're going to be able to help try to figure out what is the infrastructure that really can support this work and try to kind of move it forward in a way that we can learn from and where there's data available. The creating savings and assets piece, this is in some ways where CFED got started. In a lot of places, all the work coming onto this is about on-ramps to this asset building opportunity. So there's a lot of cities that are running their own individual development account programs, either that apply for, that work through the Assets for Independence initiative, or that are doing different kinds of IDA programs that would help finance a car or a computer or other kinds of services there. And then finally, as Jonathan talked about, protecting consumers in the financial marketplace. This is a really interesting, for me, area because even in the huge deficit scenarios that we're in right now, with budget strife, this is a lot of low-cost and no-cost ways that cities can get engaged in this work and use the tools and the regulatory power they already have to kind of look at what they can enforce. There's a few examples here of New York and San Francisco and New York and San Antonio enacting refund anticipation loan ordinances that kind of combat the high-cost lenders and tax preparers. New York prosecutes, because that's what you do, right? They're prosecuted tax preparers for deceptive advertising and promotions. And when we won that settlement, the settlement funded the city's EITC public awareness campaign. So that's pretty smart.
Just don't tell the controller of our city.
No, this isn't really being important for anybody but us. No. And then, obviously, as Mayor Tavares talked about, the foreclosure mediation ordinances and the types of things cities can do to really get on top of that is a huge protection issue as well. Sometimes not as much tied to this work, and other times it does. It just depends on how the city's positioning this work inside its group. So I think in closing, what we ended with is kind of a beginning to-do list, a beginning agenda. I think that the fast pace of the growth and the adoption of these strategies is an indicator that the work is filling important gaps in the set of services that cities provide to their residents to help them fully and fairly participate in the economic mainstream. But we think while the proliferation of financial empowerment strategies is exciting, in order for it to be sustainable and to continue to grow, we have to strengthen the foundation for doing this work. Some of the recommendations we see for doing that are really to prioritize and integrate the financial empowerment and asset-building work into the existing service delivery systems. Do that even more at scale than we've been trying to already. Absolutely needing to invest in evaluation to accelerate the proliferation of effective programs. This was all about documenting what's happening. And there's a whole new level of work that has to be done to document what works. And the evidence base that we need to create here to really influence policy, there's giant opportunities, and we'd like to see this as a new place for investment, both from the public and private sector. There absolutely, in our minds, one of the reasons we felt such a compulsion to do this work and do it quickly was because there was a risk of political transition. It wasn't unknown whether the work would continue when mayors turn over. It was unknown. I think that we've now seen that a couple of times, and we're actually hopeful about how much though, but only because I think of the way that cities are very intentionally trying to embed this work, trying to create additional leaders and additional champions inside of it, but you've got to be able to plan for that political transition as we're moving this work to scale. And then there's a whole to-do list that we all need to roll our sleeves up around, aligning local, state, and federal policy infrastructures so that this work can go to scale and can take advantage of the champions leaders that we're seeing at the municipal level. So read the report and enjoy.
Now move to a few questions, and I will start that process. Let me say that the report, as you go through it, has the best and most recent data and information that we had available. There is, however, since Jonathan's presentation, some new census data, both as to San Francisco and Savannah. They're bigger, actually, than many people think. And I want to say on behalf of those cities and others, well, I did, and as a mayor, I immediately thought there were other mayors and individuals who would require. So you look those numbers up and put them on your own. But having said that, let me ask the panel first. And Jasmine, I appreciate you joining us for this section, and I'm appreciative as well of the introduction I have for you. What does it cost? Well, what does this cost? And understanding that there are differences in scale in terms of the size of the cities, this is a tough time for cities, states, and the federal government, but especially at the city level, with a couple more years maybe of difficult revenue pictures ahead. Let's hope it's better than that, but there are those who believe it's so. What does it cost, and what's the argument in terms of that cost? And let me ask both all the panelists to address that.
So we thought a lot about cost, as you say, because you have to. There are lots of different ways to think about it. I mean, in some ways, what's useful about working with city government is that city government brings with it its own infrastructure. And so, for example, while the original investment in New York to create an Office of Financial Empowerment within my department was a relatively generous one, even then, the ability to use my inspectors, my lawyers, my mediators to augment that work, my finance people, you know, all saved on those costs as well. So the infrastructure exists when you place it somewhere within city government, and that can be useful. In some ways, as Ida mentioned, you can sometimes, sort of a secret is, you can sometimes make money too. You know, honestly, when I go out and write hundreds and sometimes, unfortunately, thousands of violations to tax preparers in New York for deceptively advertising the refund loans, you know, that brings fines into the city. That's not irrelevant in the calculation of different approaches to this work. For the licensing industry, you know, we have 1,000 debt collectors. The license fees aren't huge, but you know, there are actually ways to bring some income in. The other thing is that you can use other resources like the 311s that already exist, where I find we spend real dollars, and where I'm worried in the future as our dollars diminish, is in the large-scale public advertising. But it's a critical expense for a city because, as I mentioned, you want to give the city's imprimatur to the messaging and to the routing of people to the safe opportunities. And you know, that's where it can get quite expensive. But there are so many of these programs that take advantage of existing infrastructure, that also, by the way, take advantage of existing relationships. Part of what's key about cities is that we're already touching people in many different ways who are our target populations. They are coming to us, not necessarily to the financial empowerment hero of a city, but to the sister's agency, you know, of that player. And so the ability to leverage those relationships is also a way to really get a lot of bang for the buck.
Yeah, I guess what I would add, and I completely agree with Jonathan's points, is the costs, when you look at them, really can range very broadly. There's a whole lot of things that cities can do that cost relatively little. Convening groups, causing discussions to happen, a lot of education and outreach, as Jonathan just said, by taking advantage of channels of communication which already exist between some of our human services agencies, our affordable housing agencies, you name it, our school systems. Those types of communications oftentimes can exist, and with a little bit of work on maybe on the part of existing staff or that type of thing, and using the bully pulpit of elected officials, mayors, other city leaders, we can actually, I think, achieve a lot. Now, so that's at the low end of the cost spectrum, I think, is what we can see things happen. Now let's move to the higher end of the cost spectrum. I talked a little bit about the opening up college savings accounts. In our city, we're doing that at quite a significant cost, and because the city's going to put the initial deposit into each and every one of those accounts out of our own budget. In order to make that account real, we don't hand somebody an empty savings account. We hand somebody an account with some actual money in it, with a balance, with some earnings that is going to be accruing. And that's a significant cost for the city. Not insurmountable, but still a very important consideration, especially in these deficit times. But I was very proud of the statement that our recent mayor made, Mayor Newsom, who said even in the most difficult of budget times, the city still needs to step up and do what we know is right to support folks in our communities. And I think that's really what it comes down to. We need to take those bold steps. We need to find a way to find the money to make these programs a reality. The last thing I will say, and building again on what Jonathan just said, we do this work almost all the time in partnership with our private sector supporters, with private corporations. Our Bank on San Francisco program really leveraged the incredible amount of resources that already existed in our hometown financial services industry. And they stepped up and helped make sure that we had the tools, had the accounts, had the products to be able to steer people towards. Not everything comes entirely on the shoulders of the city, but sometimes it does come out to a cost.
Great, thank you. Jasmine Thomas from the Historical Foundation, and I want to thank CFED, I got it in, for really taking my emails at 2 a.m. and for listening to all of my rants about cities who need to get on board with CFE and really putting together this report that I'm very excited about because it's a long time coming and we do think it's critical for building the field for assets. I'm going to answer your question but also kind of flip it a little bit because I'm not a politician. I'm a social worker by trade, so a lot of my work has been directly with families early on, really trying to connect the dots of the social service system to really provide them with an opportunity to get quality jobs and access quality services. So CERTA Foundation is a national family foundation. Our founder is John Andrus. We were founded in 1917. Most people don't know us because we've just entered the field in the last few years. We really have a significant amount of experience in the community development, environment, and arts, and civic engagement strategies. But more recently, given the foundation's strategy to really shift towards building sustainable communities, strong local economies, my program area, was a core focus of that. I think with watching the economic downturn and the community development field really collapse and buckle in many ways, not completely collapse, but almost collapse, and buckle under fiscal constraints, we recognized fairly quickly that community development wasn't just about building affordable housing, but was really about connecting people to jobs and making sure that there was a meaningful connection to the larger economy for working class families. So I guess the question that you ask, from our perspective, it's really, CERTA's got a social justice philanthropy strategy. It's more for us the cost of doing nothing rather than the cost of actually implementing strategies. And for a lot of what you heard from the cities, it's really the convening power and alignment of their services and agencies. But for us, it's really also the convening power. How do you, better educate other mayors who aren't necessarily doing this work to really pay attention to the fact of the number of people who are unbanked, who are not really being able to contribute to a tax base in a way that they would like, or even participating in the larger economy. With 15 million people unemployed, it's no longer just about the working poor, it's about all of us. And it's really about understanding that our economic fates are tied. If we can't contribute to the economy, America can't be as strong and competitive as it wants to be. The other piece that I want to really talk about is, and I don't know if you're going to get into it, but the economic realities of families have significantly changed in this situation, economic downturn that we're looking at. We keep talking about economic recovery, but yet I continue to sit with my new director, Sean. Hi, Sean. Please raise your hands. We continue to sit with folks, and we were just in San Francisco on Tuesday, sitting with families, literally crying with us as funders, telling us that their situation was pretty stable up until a year ago. They were making a good living. They have been in this country for 10 years, are documented, have saved significant amount of money that they no longer have. And it's not because of what the city's not doing. It's because we don't have the financial mechanisms or the policy structures in place to really support the millions of people who've been unemployed for years. So we're not talking 6 months. We're not talking just a short amount of time. So the question that I hope this launch will continue to ask and mayors will continue to really take a stand on is, what is our strategy? What is the cost of doing nothing to us? And are we satisfied with just that? And the last thought that I have is, what sense does it make to continually just focus on fiscal austerity if you don't have a tax base to really draw from? Who's going to pay for it? If you don't have citizens with real jobs and incomes and assets to be able to sustain themselves in really uncertain economic times, what do we do? So I will continue to urge other mayors And they know who they are. They're not in this room, but they will be in this room. And I look forward to continuing the conversation, particularly as we move forward with implementing a number of these strategies. Thanks.
So let us take some questions from the audience. There's a microphone here, but we can also, it's possible to be heard from wherever you may be seated. While you're thinking of, go ahead, please.
Hi, I'm with Results, which is a grassroots anti-poverty advocacy organization, and we're going to be looking at a federal campaign around asset building this year. So what federal policies is CFD looking to this year, either that you are advocating for or that you would like other organizations to advocate for?
We don't have enough time. There are many policies that make a difference. We talked about the savings program, which is starting to be replicated in cities around the country, and looking for an opportunity to build that savings program into the tax time experience is very important. We've been working with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to think about what levers they can be pulling, the FDIC, the Fed around overdraft regulations and other banking regulations that we think are really critical. But the one I'd actually like to focus for a minute on connects to our last question, which is the question of funding. You know, part of what's interesting about financial empowerment is how promising the results have been early on, although we need to continue to evaluate that. But in many ways, financial empowerment programs are boutique, and they are not part of the traditional funding streams, which are massive and which tend to dominate service delivery approaches in cities. And so part of what we're trying to do to help finance this work, to make a case for financing the work, in the worst possible time to finance anything, and to sustain this work over time, is to really prove that the insertion of financial empowerment programming, whether it's access to safe banking, one-on-one counseling, etc., actually improves the outcomes of the traditional anti-poverty efforts. So, for example, is foreclosure prevention counseling more successful if you're doing wraparound financial counseling of their entire finance as opposed to just what's happening with their mortgage? The example I love, which is a bit in left field, domestic violence. Are more women in domestic violence situations able to leave their homes if you were inserting financial counseling, quality financial counseling, into the program in a way that is integrated into the program? Do you get better outcomes? Do you have fewer return visits? Do you actually save money in those outcomes? So we've been spending a lot of time across CFD cities trying to figure out how to embed financial counseling, for example, into those traditional programs to make the case that it's almost like we talked about, like a super vitamin, that when you take this part into your program does better. It has better outcomes, the money goes farther, you get better results. And then I think the promising programs that you can read about in this report have the real potential to become large-scale, sustained, regardless of the ups and downs of mineral interest. That's where I'd start.
And just as a sidebar, I've been working with IDA to begin to unravel where are the opportunities at the federal level, and Andrea has as well. I think those pieces are critical because it's not just about it's important what's going on the local level, but we need to really begin to fundamentally change how we provide formula funding and how cities are able to better use and align those sources of funding, which is very difficult right now. I've seen maps that look like, hieroglyphics of how money is being used, and I think it's going to be a critical point that CFED will really be able to take a leadership role in.
So one of the chapters, I'll just say briefly, one of the final chapters is one where we initially tried to start grappling with what is the alignment opportunities that we are in general policy. I think on CFED's website, if you Americas here, there's a whole kind of asset building agenda at the federal level that has a lot of support to this field, right? Everything from the refundable savers credits happening so that we actually do have some real dollars for rebuilding that flow right into auto IRA, right, for retirement savings, and being able to align the way that 401ks and IRAs can be used as a loan against kind of building assets over a lifetime. These are all huge kind of pieces on the asset platform. I think that what this work has called out is a whole new set of opportunities. If we can get into CRA, looking at Community Reinvestment Act, can the kind of work we're talking about here around the service test can be redefined so that you can have, as the credits go toward the kind of retail banking opportunities that you're doing in these communities, not just the lending opportunities, because it's actually flipped these days about what's available and what's not. There's a proliferation of lending that sometimes is great and sometimes not so great an opportunity. Not so much in terms of the kind of retail fundamental, non-risky, non-expensive financial services that are provided. So we'd love to see things like that as well.
I have 3 questions in 5 minutes. And these answers are going to be our very best answers.
Scott Bernstein, Center for Neighborhood Technology. We translate some of those hieroglyphics that Jasmine was talking about. First of all, congratulations to CFED and everybody, a great initiative. Second, there's a short section in the report that talks about reducing the cost of living for people, and I'd like to make an offer to help partner with you to do the translation on maybe how to do that. Our new Housing and Transportation Affordability Index shows that foreclosure hotspots are largely related to spikes in the cost of living, not just a reduction in income. And so, we'd like to offer you the use of the index so that you're counting transportation and energy costs, not just housing costs. Cities are the leaders. Your cities are the leaders in how to accelerate offering choice. And if you can connect those dots within your administration, I think that then answers the question that preceded mine about where else in federal policy. There's a number of things on the table this year that might or might not increase access to mass transit, resources for energy efficiency, water conservation in arid regions where water costs more than energy. Are you up for this, Andrea? No, I'm serious. We really want to offer to help you make this one a success. And the risk is that if you get all this right, and then all of a sudden nobody's been paying attention and the price of gas goes up again, and it will, people are going to wonder what happened. But I think if with a little preparation right now, you can show that this actually makes cities and the residents more ready.
I couldn't agree more. I think a lot of that challenge actually does fall on the city local government as well, because as you've heard time and time again, too much of our work happens in silos, even in city government. So, we have the transportation experts, not always, maybe they're connected to the planning experts, but what about to the food stamps and the human services experts? So a lot of that work, I think, would be really benefited all across the board.
Next question here.
Yeah, I'm wondering how the cities have engaged employers, maybe through some, how the cities have engaged employers, maybe through some strategies like employer-assisted housing. Or one thing I've noticed over the years with financial education is that people are so busy in school, they're often single parents, that they have trouble staying involved with the classes. And that there have been some good examples of having financial education at the workplace.
I would say probably Savannah is the best example of the city that within the CFED coalition that's been doing as much. So Savannah has really taken the lead on trying to figure out how to deliver financial literacy, financial education resources at the workplace. There's also a lot going on around not just the financial literacy piece, but bringing tax help to folks there, looking when they're signing people up. There's great experiments going on with EasySave,
Right.
you in New York City.
Right. I mean, one example is we use ourselves as a sample employer. We are at the largest employer in New York with 330,000 employees. So in experimenting with automatic deduction approaches and trying to bring large-scale versions of that work to learn about it is one of the ways we're trying to do as well, to set that example. And Jose's had great experiences thinking about the direct deposit.
I think, in fact, employers are our largest untapped resource, really, right now. And we are excited about finding new ways to reach out and partner with them. Following on a lot of what Jonathan just said, we're setting ourselves up as a model as the largest employer in San Francisco to be doing everything we can to go to 100% electronic pay, and then use our example, and coincidentally the federal government's example, to say to other employers, integrate this into everything you do. It will be better for the company in cost savings, better environmentally, and better for the employees.
And just imagine, just one point, as a city employer, when you're the employer, that sets an example for the private sector to even follow on. And I think a number of funders, particularly just yesterday having a conversation with a cluster of funders in Living City, I mean, we're trying to influence as much of the asset framework within employer relationships in workforce as possible.
You have 10 questions, but I have time for one.
Don Mathis, Community Action Partnership, congrats on a great study. Just a quickie following up, narrowing down the results question. I'm from Philly, I don't need a microphone. The Obama administration's bipartisan support for the 50% tax credit savings thing that's on the table. For those of us that live in this town, all we're hearing from a lot of people on the Hill, nothing works, nothing works, nothing works. This clearly works. We've got a proposal on the table, some bipartisan support. My question is, I see Cliff Johnson here from League of Cities and Rob Doherty from Hatcher, so you got the political muscle to make this happen. Is there a plan to get this up to the Hill through the media, help promote the savings credit, and just get the good news out so we can really tell people there is stuff that works? Is there a plan for after the great...
Carol Williams, tell me what to do here.
Well, I think what we need to do, thanks Doug for raising the savers credit, which is
our federal policy director.
I'm Carol Wayman, federal policy director at CFED, and we really need the help of the mayors and your contact with employers and state treasurers to make the expansion of the savers credit a top priority. That's a 50% match for every $500 in individual saves.
Yeah, and I think, the cities, we have been actually on the Hill, coordinated strategy. We're sitting a few seats away from our policy heavy lifter in the coalition. And, part of what we're bringing to the table is actual experience in this.
Well, maybe you know somebody at Bloomberg News that could get you on the air to talk about that.
There you go.
No, I'm serious. The Hill is great, but Morning Joe and Bloomberg News and other, and other stuff. This is powerful stuff, and it would help the people we all want to help if it could just go beyond this room. And I'm not putting it. I'm just saying, let's take it and run. Thanks.
That sounds like a perfect way for us to end this particular portion. Let us thank CFP, CFED, and thank each of our